Beautiful, beautiful. Beautiful, Ginger. Thank you, thank you. World-class music. We have world-class music. Thank you, Ginger. Beautiful. Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you had lots of good things to be thankful for this last week, and I hope you continue to have lots of great things to be thankful for. As one of my blessings I always like to give is, I hope you have more blessings than you can ever count, but I hope you never stop counting. Because the more we count, the more we receive. It's just part of the flow. We've been working in a series of lessons based upon Charles Fillmore's The 12 Powers of Man. And to me, it's just one of the most wonderful transformative works that has come out of Unity. And it really teaches us of our unique divine qualities that each and every one of us has. And they're unique because each and every one of us experiences and expresses them in different ways to different levels and different degrees, and we all develop them in different ways. And then we express them in combinations in different ways. And there's a great power in each and every one of them. And we have covered a number of them. I won't go over all of the ones we've done so far, but this week we're going to be discussing the divine power of strength. We've also been using a resource that is written by our neighbor down the south here at Unity in San Antonio, Linda Martello-Whitsitt, called Divine Audacity. It's a really great explanation and understanding of how these 12 powers really show up in us in different ways. And I've really gotten a lot of inspiration and insight from it myself. And so as I was thinking about it, this week we're going to be talking about the energy and the quality of strength. And Linda refers to these as lights, and I think that's a really good understanding of them because it really gives more of an image of vibration. These are energy vibrations, you might say, that are within each and every one of us. And you're aware that everything really ultimately is energy. And this is something that actually has been discussed in a mystical way as everything ultimately is spirit. And more recently in quantum physics, they talk about everything being energy. And we have different energy vibrations that we're all part of, and we have these different vibrations in us, and as a part of our not only our physical nature, but our mental, emotional nature. And ultimately, every thought that we have is a vibration, and every emotion that we have is a vibration. And so it's really valuable, I think, for us to recognize that the different energies and vibrations that we hold in our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, are what really resonate out into the world as different vibrations, and then those actually attract and form different experiences in our life. In Unity, we say thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Well, it's more than just simply thoughts in terms of an intellectual sense, but it's also our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions and our beliefs and our attitudes. All of those contribute to what really we demonstrate and control and we show up in our world and our experiences. So I was thinking about the quality of strength, and I came across a story that really, a couple of stories actually that I really like that really speak to me about the idea of strength, because there's an inner and there's an outer strength. And we oftentimes want prayers to be able to experience a particular circumstance and to be able to go through it in a more powerful way or stronger way perhaps. And so there was a man who stood on the side of the road hitchhiking, and it was very dark out in the middle of the night, and there was actually a storm going on, and the rain was just pouring down, and he could just barely, it was night, and he could barely see and there were no cars passing on this road. And the storm was really pretty strong, and he was, feeling pretty, anxious about the whole experience, and he could hardly see a few feet in front of him. And so he was suddenly saw a car coming around towards him, and it stopped. And so he got in, and as he got in, he looked over and realized there was no driver in the car. And the car started moving again, and as he's going down the road, he's going in this car with no driver, and he's terrified. He doesn't know what's going on with this. And as he's going along, he looks ahead, and he's coming up to a curve, and he goes, what am I going to do? And so, dear God, please give me strength. Give me strength to get through this. Give me courage. Oh, God, please. And about that time, a hand reaches in through the window and turns the car, and it goes actually to the left, and it turns, and he's like, oh my gosh, he didn't know what was going on. And finally he gets enough courage up and he jumps out of the car, and he runs into this small town there, and then finds a little pub there. And he's drenched and wet and soaking wet, and he orders 2 tequilas. I'll have 2 tequilas. And he's, and a little bit he kind of gets his nerves back down. He's calmed down a little bit. And a few minutes later, 2 other guys come in and looked at him and said, hey, that's the guy that jumped in our car when we were pushing it. We just never know what situations are sometimes, and sometimes we need to have a little better view of what's going on. But there's nothing wrong with praying for strength in those kind of circumstances when we don't know what's going on, right? Anybody know what I'm talking about? We have experiences in life that seem one way, and we don't really quite understand all of what's going on. Well, one day there was 3 men that were walking along, and they came along a raging river. It was a violent raging river, really, and they needed to get to the other side of it, but they had no idea how they're going to get to the other side. So the first man prayed, God, please give me the strength to cross this river. And poof, he had arms this big, and he had legs this big, and he had enough muscle. He swam across this. It only took him 2 hours to swim across this river. And the second man prayed and said, God, please give me the strength and the ability to cross this river. And poof, there was a rowboat, and the man got in the rowboat and was able to row across in about 3 hours. And the third man had seen all this working going on. He said, oh, wow, okay. So he prayed, dear God, please give me the strength, the ability, and the intelligence to cross this river. And poof, he turned into a woman. And she looked down the road and saw a bridge and walked across it. That's for you ladies. Oh my goodness. Got to have fun with all this stuff. In Isaiah chapter 30, verse 15, it says, in returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. I want to read that one again because it's just a beautiful, beautiful verse. In returning and in rest you shall be saved, and in quietness and in trust shall be your strength. So we think about strength in a lot of different ways in the world, and we realize that there's a physical strength, but we're really referring to here is not just physical strength, although it can be physical strength, but really more spiritual strength. And it's our capacity to really stand undaunted even in the midst of stifling or difficult circumstances, to be able to act with courage and to stay our course, to be steady in whatever we're moving toward. One of the great stories that I love from Scripture about the quality of strength is the story of David and Goliath. And it provides a really powerful illustration of the faculty of strength and how we also can tune into the strength that comes from within us. See, the Israelites had prepared for a battle against the Philistines, and the Philistines had a mighty warrior named Goliath, and he first verbally was taunting and sparring with the Israelites and terrifying them and threatening and making sure that they knew that how big he was. He was huge, and they said his height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze. On his head, he was armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. I don't know what a shekel is, but that seems pretty heavy to me. He had greaves of bronze on his legs. He had a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders, and the shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron. And his shield bearer went before him. This is from 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 4 through 7. So clearly Goliath was immense and mighty. And a young boy, David, he was actually too young to join in the battle. And so his job was to basically bring provisions to his older brothers as they were preparing for the battle. However, he heard the boasts of Goliath and challenging the Israelites to battle. And to the chagrin of his family, David went to King Saul and said, I'll face him. He offered to fight Goliath. And Saul said to David, but you're not able to go against this Philistine to fight him, for you are just a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth. But David persisted, and eventually the king Saul reluctantly agreed, and he tried to put his armor on David. And the armor basically swallowed him up, as you can imagine. He couldn't move in the armor. It was actually too heavy for him. So David removed all of the armor, and he removed the armor on the battlefield, and he was dressed just in his plain clothes, and he took with him a hunting sling and 5 smooth stones. And Goliath appeared disgusted when he saw this puny little David approaching. He laughed and taunted him, but David kept moving. And he taunted him and said, you come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. And this very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. And all of this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into my hand. So I love the imagery of this and the powerful imagery of it, and then metaphysically, it really does represent any kind of challenge that seems really big to you in your life. Goliath is really basically the monsters that we have, some of them hiding under our bed and some of them in our just daily living. Those things that seem to get really blown up and seem to be big and important and scary and frightening. And David, and interestingly enough, does represent our spiritual nature. It represents that part of ourselves that really knows and has absolute trust and faith in the divine essence of spirit that is within our very being. And that spirit doesn't necessarily need to have armor. In fact, one of the things that really allows the strength of that power, that strength to come through, it comes through ultimately in our vulnerability. David was vulnerable. He didn't try to shield himself. He didn't try to build himself up. He didn't try to puff himself up to frighten. He basically said, this is not my battle. This is the Lord's battle, and you will be delivered to me. There's a powerful understanding that when we really look at our troubles, our difficulties, our challenges from that energy and from that space, there's something that shifts and something that happens. When we stop letting our ego run the show, our ego basically is that part of ourselves that feels like it needs the shield, the cover, and for that matter, even the mask that we sometimes wear. Sometimes we put on masks to present ourselves in certain places, in certain circumstances and situations. And it's not an uncommon thing to do. In fact, I think it's kind of, in this form, in this life, it's somewhat natural. But it really does oftentimes prevent us from really seeing and knowing the truth of who and what we are. The mask is basically a concept of who we are, a belief system we have about ourselves. And so we oftentimes try to deal with our energies, with our challenges, with our difficulties, by putting on a belief system about who we are that is really not the essence of who we are. Sometimes we face our difficulties by simply saying, I can't. And I'm going to suggest to you that even the word I can't ultimately on the spiritual level is not a truth. It's untrue. And it automatically puts us in a place of disability, of not having strength, of not being in the strength of who and what we are. And so one of the things that helps us to move past that is to recognize and to see how we are setting ourselves up and limiting ourselves in our own thinking and our own belief system. So David goes before Goliath and he takes one stone. And he takes one stone. He has 5 smooth stones, but he only takes one. And it only takes one to knock out the giant. It's a great imagery, a great metaphor. And metaphysically, it really has to do with holding to a single awareness of principle and using that to really confront or to deal with or face whatever difficulty or challenging that we're having right now. Even one powerful statement of truth can dissipate the illusions of fear, of doubt, of worry, of concern. Sometimes those giants that we have in our life are things like a disease. Sometimes it's a financial circumstance or situation. Sometimes it's grief over a loss, a death. And we try to sometimes push our way through those kinds of experiences. And pushing our way through them is not necessarily the most effective way or the strongest way that we can go through some of these experiences in life. Sometimes we have to be willing to take off our armor and be there in the midst of those circumstances and situations and know that there's something bigger, higher at work in that circumstance that will deliver not only us through the circumstances, but will deliver the circumstance to us in a way that allows us to overcome, that allows us to rise above, that allows us to prevail, you might say. So I love this imagery. And one of the things that Linda talks about in terms of strength that really speaks to me, she says there's really three basic qualities of strength that we have within us. One is stability. And stability is a great image of this is Linda gives an example of her husband going up on the roof on a ladder, and the ladder slips, and he falls and has a pretty significant injury. And what she points out is that basically when he set up the ladder, it didn't have a strong foundation. It wasn't level. He didn't have it centered and balanced in a certain way. And there's a great awareness about that in our experience in our lives. We need a strong foundation. And a strong foundation really has to do with really our connection with the divine. If we are putting our ladder in mud, it's probably going to sink and fall. If we're putting our ladder on sand, it's going to lean one way or the other. If we're putting a ladder of our lives on something that's not solid, like the truth of our being, you can bet there's going to be some shifting going on, wouldn't you bet? And that's one of the things that we sometimes do. We do things not really with that understanding or that awareness of that strong foundation that's in the very essence of who and what we are. Julie and I had an amazing adventure last night. We actually had a great Thanksgiving at the beach, and we went to Port Aransas for the first time, and I fell in love with Port Aransas. What a great beach town, and what a great beach they had. And one of the things that was happening for me, it's really kind of interesting. Spirit gives me some interesting ways of learning these lessons. You know, I share with everybody, these are my lessons, and you guys I get to share them with you. And so actually just a few days before we were ready to go down there, I was in the process of getting our hot tub ready to, getting it fixed and, taking the water out and refilling it and all that kind of stuff and getting it cleaned out. And I wound up reaching one way and I wound up tweaking my lower back. And interestingly enough, metaphysically, the lower back is the center of strength. And that's one of the things I had been, of course, preparing for our lesson. I've been reading about strength, and I'm going, okay, I'm listening, okay. I'm listening. And so I really was having some challenges with my low back. And it seemed like whenever I would walk in certain ways or turn in certain ways, I would get a sharp pain or a spasm, and I was really having some challenges. But when we finally did get to Port Aransas, we spent some wonderful time walking on the beach and just sitting on the beach and relaxing. And ocean waves for me are very therapeutic. I don't know if it ever for you, but they're just one of the most therapeutic things for me. So just in the very act of walking up and down the beach and doing some good stretches and making myself a little more flexible and loosening things up, over the next day or so, all the pain is gone. I'm having no problems with my back at all this morning. And it just was a great metaphor for me of that verse that I read earlier, that in quietness and relax. And it's in quietness, really, that we develop strength. And it's like, okay, well, the pain was there, and I went and relaxed, and I went and took care of myself, and I went and I feel so much stronger. And by the end of Julie will tell you, when I was walking there the first time, it's like, are you coming? Are you coming? But by the end of it, I was kind of going to her, are you coming? Are you coming? So I was able to really shift that energy. So that was a great lesson for me of, we don't necessarily gain strength by trying to use force. Sometimes when we find ourselves not feeling our strength, our reaction is to try to force strength. But the very act of forcing strength really actually amplifies in some ways our not tuning into our strength. So stability is an important part of this. In the Tao Te Ching, it says, the soft and subtle are the companions of life, while the stiff and unyielding are the companions of death. So part of strength really has to do with flexibility, our ability to be flexible. And we are actually much more stable when we're flexible. Do you realize that? How many of you have been up on top of a really tall skyscraper? Did you feel the movement? See, skyscrapers are not rigid. If they were rigid, they wouldn't stand. The wind would blow them down. They actually sway. And I'll tell you, I've been on some when the wind was really picking up, and I felt like I was surfing. And they give enough give and enough sway in the construction of these amazing structures, these amazing buildings, to allow them to flow, to allow them to move with the wind, to allow them to move with the environment. Because if they didn't do that, they would break. If I were to give you a pencil right now, I bet there's not a person in this room couldn't take that pencil and snap it, right? But if I gave you 2 pencils, it might be a little more challenging. If I gave you 3 pencils, you could probably do 2. If I gave you 3, it'd be a little more. If I gave you 5 pencils and you put them all together and you tried to break them, there might be a few people in here that could do that. But if I gave you 10 pencils and you put them together, I bet there's not a person in this room that could break that. So one of the things to recognize about strength is not necessarily something that comes just from our own individual strength. It's important to recognize that strength also comes from our collective strength. There's a strength in our coming together in circumstances that gives us a stability that is beyond our own individual abilities. There was a small boy who was trying very hard to lift a hard stone, really heavy stone, and his father was kind of happening by and noting the son's failure. He said to him, "Are you using all your strength?" And the boy is heaving and says, "Yes, I am." And the father said, "No, because you haven't asked me to help." Sometimes our strength comes from being able and willing to ask for the help that we need. To ask first from Spirit for the help that we need. And then listening to where Spirit guides us out here in the world to receive our strength. Sometimes that strength can come through friends, through family. Sometimes it can come through absolute strangers. Julie and I had another amazing adventure last night. On our way back, driving down from our house down to the hotel we were at Port Aransas, our GPS told us it takes about 3 hours and 40-something minutes approximately. So we thought, okay, well, that's a very nice trip down there. We did a little road trip and listening to some nice music. And so we went down there, and the first exit we found was completely backed up once we got on 35. And we sat there for it took us about an hour and 15 minutes to get past Onion Creek down here. And then once we got on the road, we got down into somewhere around Kyle or Butte or one of those places. And again, it was interesting enough, 2 vehicles on fire, 2 fires, and traffic was stopped. And so it took us about 4.5, 5 hours. It took about 5 hours to get down there. We thought, okay, well, it's a wonderful place. We had a great time. And then we thought, well, let's think about going a different way going back. Let's think about going, and Julie noticed that there's another way to go across the ferry. How many of you have been across the ferry there? A few of you have, yeah. So we decided to go across the ferry. We thought, well, that'd be fun. And, you know, Julie and I moved here from the Northwest, and they have these big, massive ferries that are bigger than, you know, almost as big as this building, it seems, and you can put hundreds of cars on them. And we thought, well, this is going to be a nice, wonderful ride across the ferry, And we get there, and we're waiting in line, and I think we waited about 45 minutes to get on the ferry. And we get on the ferry, and there's like 20 cars on the ferry, and Julie says, oh, this is Tom Sawyer's Raft. And I said, well, this is kind of ferry I remember when I was in Arkansas. We had a few small ferries like that, and I said, well, it'll be fun. And we'd say, well, let's get out and kind of look around. We looked around, and we're going across, and I see the shore over there, and I thought, boy, that's really close. And I went over to the guy that was one of the guys working on the ferry and said, how long is this ferry ride? And he says, oh, 3 if they take your time, 4 minutes. And I thought, well, okay, that's an adventure. And I thought it was fun. It was interesting. So we get off, and we think, okay, no, we're going to use our GPS and find our way back home. We had no signal. Well, not enough signal to get any directions. And so you get off the ferry, and I have to say a little bit something about the roads in Texas. Have you guys noticed that there's hardly any ever signs to tell you which way to go in Texas? Have you noticed that? I mean, it's just, you have to really, really look for them. And oftentimes they're just not there. And I don't know if people just borrow them and don't put them back or what, but they're just not really very good signage, and I've noticed. And we wind up going, well, it was such an adventure. We wound up going to Rockport, and we wound up getting directions from 5 different people, and at least 5 different people told us directions that wound us back up in Rockport. And we were just going around in circles. This went on for about 2 hours. I kid you not. For about 2 hours, we were trying to find our route, and we stopped different places to find maps. You know, you can't buy maps at gas stations anymore these days. Some of you young folks probably know that because GPS is everywhere, right? Got news for you. It's not everywhere. What's that? Okay, well, you'll help me figure that one out. Good, but I will definitely get a map to put in my car if you can find one, right? So, you know, we had this great adventure, you know, and it was, we were getting a little stressed at times, and but, you know, at one point and I know Julie was doing the same. We just kind of turned within and said, we know we're going to get there. We're just going to know that. And one lady, bless her heart, we know she was trying to help, and Julie actually found a brochure that had a kind of a map on it. You know, I'm sure it wasn't an exact map, but kind of a map on it. But it gave us enough information to ask, how do we get to this road? And so we went, and there was one lady who says, "Oh, are you guys looking? What are you looking for?" And she was obviously trying to be very helpful, very sweet, and she said, "Oh yeah, well you just go this way." And I'm looking at the map, going, "No, wait a minute, we're here." She said, "No, you want to go this way, and if you go that way," and it was giving me directions to go this way. So I thought, okay, well, we'll go that way. We'll go that way. So we went that way. We went that way, and we went that way, and we went that way, and finally, about 10 miles down the road, I'm going, this is not the way. Should have listened to my intuition. But finally, we turned around, and we did find it was in the opposite direction, and she was turned around herself, obviously. So, you know, for me, one of the things about strength is also tenacity. We kept trying. But the other thing is about that, I really kind of got some interesting awarenesses about it. You know, the interesting thing about our wonderful GPS systems and our wonderful cell phones is that this is something to recognize, is that the further you get away from the cell phone tower, the weaker the signal becomes. Let me say it again, because there's a great metaphor in this. The further we get away from our cell phone towers, the source of the signal, the weaker it becomes. And so if spirit is that cell phone tower, and you know, we know that spirit is everywhere. The truth is it's everywhere. But the further we distance ourselves from that awareness of spirit, the weaker we become. That our true strength comes from that divine connection and that divine signal that's always there and available to us, to allow us to move through these circumstances and give us the information and the guidance and the data that we need in order to really move in the direction of our dreams, move in the direction of our possibilities, to move in the direction of Spirit and with Spirit. Well, the good news is, we are still lost, and no, I'm just kidding. We found our way. We did find the correct road, and we did drive, and it took us about a little over 6 hours to make it from Port Aransas, when it should have taken 3 hours and 40-something minutes. But the other thing is, strength is also courage. We had the courage to take an adventure, and it was an adventure, and at times it was a little unnerving that we were going in circles. We kept going back. Wait a minute, we were just here. Courage, according to Judith Vorst, strength, she says, strength, according to Judith Vorst, is the capacity to break a chocolate bar into 4 pieces with your bare hands and then only eat 1 piece. So centered in strength, we have a courageous power that can help us to move through difficult and challenging circumstances and adventures that we didn't plan on. And the other part of strength is tenacity. It's that ability to just stick to it, to be able to stay with it. We know that strength is manifest everywhere, for we see it in the mechanical world, according to Charles Fillmore. He says, a great locomotive starts from the depot, moving slowly at first, but when it gains momentum, it speeds down the track like a streak. And thus it is with spiritual strength. Beginning sometimes with a very small thought, it takes on momentum and eventually becomes a powerful idea. Every one of us can strengthen his hold on the thought of divine substance until it becomes a powerful idea, and filling the consciousness and manifesting itself as plenty in our affairs. And so each and every one of us has a power, has a strength. Sometimes that strength, in order to develop and build it, we have to continue to do those things that allow us to move back into connection with our source, to allow us to move back into the range of our cell towers, you might say. And it's not a physical movement as much as it is an inner movement. It's an inner movement back into that place within us where we hear that still small voice of Spirit and allow that still small voice to give us the directions that we need. I'm sure many of you heard the term GPS actually stands for God Positioning System, right? God Positioning System. I like that metaphor. We all have within us an amazing God Positioning System. And the way we allow ourselves to hear that and tune into it and to allow it to move us into those places of strength is through our meditation times, through our prayer, through our affirmations, and through holding an image and awareness of our great possibilities and holding the dreams of Spirit moving through us in our lives. In 1953, a year before I was born, as a matter of fact, there was a startup company that had experimented with rust prevention. It was a solvent for the aerospace industry. And one attempt after another kept failing. They were trying to develop something that would disperse rust. And 20 times, 30 times, 39 times, and on the 40th try, WD-40 was created. And WD-40 stands for water displacement perfected on the 40th try. 40th try. So persistence is a part of strength also. We continue to come back to those things that we know are going to enliven us, that are going to bless us. And when we find ourselves falling down, which anybody ever fallen down? When we find ourselves falling down, which we do, we get back up again, right? And we keep going. And we keep going back to the truth that we know. We keep going back to center, as I always like to remind myself. Always returning to center. Never centered, always returning to center. So whatever difficulty or challenge you're facing today, or you may face in the future, or that's still hanging around there from the past, Take this opportunity to know that there's something greater. There is a David within you that can easily take the truth of your divine nature and direct it at that challenge or difficulty, and you will be given, it will be delivered, it will be challenged, it will be transformed, it will be changed, it will be given to you in a way that you know exactly the path you need to take, the steps that you are here for, and you'll find that a strength works through you that is beyond our limited awareness of who and what we are, into a divine knowing of our unique divine nature. So you got your slings ready? So we'll move into our meditation time, and as we move into our meditation time, just take a moment to really know that there's a power within you. It's a power of overcoming. It's a power of greatness. It's a power of strength. And it is your true nature. Let's have a little music and then we'll move into meditation. Ginger, plays the song. So it is. Let's take a nice deep breath, breathe into the heart space. As we breathe into that heart space, we know we are connecting to that power of strength. The power of strength in our body, and we begin by, in our hearts and minds, standing in that strength. And see yourself standing tall, with your feet positioned in a solid foundation. Allowing your shoulders to be relaxed and firm and clear. Just allow them to let go. Let your chin and jaw relax. And just allow the crown of your head to rise as you align yourself and center. And center in that spiritual strength. And know that the bones and the ligaments and the tendons and the large muscles and all of the highly sensitive nerves are all working together. And the small of the back is relaxed and flexible and incredibly strong. It allows you to move in different ways. It allows you to flow in different ways. We allow the light of spring green to flow through the whole body, through every area of the body, through the back, the curves, the waistline, shining that light through our abdominal cavity, allowing the body to be embraced by that light, and even beyond the body, and letting that light spread out this room and this wonderful city out into our world, just seeing that light of healing unfolding. And in the quiet of your stillness, be open to hearing and feeling and knowing that sense of I am. And let your heart feel and know this truth. I am strength. I am divine strength. I am spiritual strength. And concentrate on the truth of this idea. This one truth principle can overcome great obstacles, Goliaths. And we go deeper into that silence and that wonderful stillness from which all strength arises. And we listen in stillness and in silence. And from this place of stillness and silence, I shall mount up on wings as eagle. I shall run and not be weary. I shall walk and not faint. For I know the strength of the divine in me, and I accept it. I claim it. I trust it. I am divine strength. And that is my spiritual name and nature. Strong and stable and steadfast in body and mind and spirit and emotions. And the power of that standability, anchored to the shore, even in the winds of change. I am steadfast, centered in truth, rooted in God, the source of all strength. Breathing in that energy of strength, allowing it to fill not only your lungs and your heart and your mind, your whole body, and radiating that strength and all is well. Take a nice deep breath. Take one more nice deep breath. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes and be present here and now in this space, knowing the strength of the divine is working in and through you. And all is well.